means it's time to start. You too can have your own bill for $5.99 at Staples. Surprisingly well. All right. My name is Belinda Braunstein. I coordinate the English Language Institute, part of the CRTE, Center for Research on Teaching Excellence. And I'm here to co-present on communicating effectively with your students. I have two co-presenters, and they shall introduce themselves. Take it away, men. Gentlemen, excuse me.
I'm Henry. I'm a grad student in the Environmental Systems Program, third year PhD, studying Riverhead Valley.
I'm Mohsen, a PhD student in computer science, 5th year.
But we're going to pretend they're SHA. Poof, you're SHA.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Welcome to a better world. These are people who know how to communicate, so I expect some answers from you more than from the engineers. I'm sorry, that's on video. Okay, so I expect some answers for, when we do some discussion. All right, how many of you have heard of student learning outcomes? Raise your hand. SLO, student learning outcomes. This is the only group. That's interesting. Or maybe because we hit the others first. All right, so student learning outcomes are what you want people to get out of that class or that workshop, that presentation. Of course, we have student learning outcomes for this one. We have 3 of them. The first one's divided into 2 parts. Student learning outcome 1. By the end of this workshop, you will have demonstrated awareness of possible student TA expectations and cultural differences. Who is international? Raise your hand if you're from another country. We're going to make sure that what you expect to happen in the classroom is what normally happens in a U.S. classroom, because it varies from country to country and actually school to school within the U.S. What's considered okay and what's considered not okay. Everyone kind of agree with that? It kind of depends on where you went to school. So for international TAs, we want you to know the differences between countries to make sure you know what will be normal, okay to expect here. And for everybody, possible UG expectations, that's undergraduate, UG is our abbreviation, undergraduate expectations that vary from reality. They might expect college to be like in the movies, and they expect, or in some ways like high school, and not. Second, by the end of this workshop, you will know 4 common causes for lack of student understanding and have options at hand to moderate this challenge. At the very least, you have a gold paper in front of you. That is not part of this workshop. It is a gift for you. A checklist of ideas, things you can do in class if your students seem to be having trouble. They're not following, or they're not interacting, they're not asking questions. What can you do? A whole bunch of ideas on 1 page, 2 sides to look at after this workshop. You're welcome. And third, by the end of this workshop, you will have techniques at your disposal to effectively communicate with students in class and also in office hours. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, people aren't doing much. If you're ready, raise your hand. Yes, let's get on with it. Okay, they are alive.
Can I ask a question?
No. Of course, yes. I just want to see if they're paying attention.
So I've noticed that in the last 10 years, presenting the learning outcomes at the beginning of presentations has become a lot more common.
Yes.
Does that actually help, or does that facilitate learning?
In my experience, I have not seen any studies on it. I haven't investigated it. In my personal experience, yes. Actually, when I give workshops at international conferences, because I do for TESOL, Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages, I'm one of the few presenters that actually starts with, welcome to the session. At the end of the session, you will know this, and you will be able to do that. And people don't walk out. They stay. Okay, it's worth my time. I find it's very useful for buy-in. What's also useful, here's a teaching tip, at the end, to review the outcomes and see if you did it, if you actually accomplished it. Was this right? Did we do it? Raise your hand. If so, they raise your hand. How about this one? Yes, no. And I actually didn't plan that for this because we're on such a tight schedule. But I find it helps, and I do it with my freshman courses. When I taught Writing 1, which is 2 days a week, I did it weekly outcomes every first day, not both days. And when I teach a class that meets once a week, I just do it every class. Up to you. You don't have to do it. I find it's good, even if you're leading a discussion section. Hey, by the end of this discussion section, you will understand the causes of, the various causes that, things that led up to the war in Vietnam, for example, so that they know what they're getting out of the section. You get a lot of buy-in that way. Yes,
I think it really helps keeping me organized too, especially with discussion sections. You can go on these tangents, and then you come back to it and you realize that like your discussion section's over, and you've never hit the things you were supposed to hit because they brought up the question when you explained.
That's a perfect example. In fact, we've just gone off on a tangent. But it was a useful one. Thank you, Timothy. So we're going to start. We want to keep this lively, so we're going to start with an activity, and then eventually we'll get to talking. But we're going to start with an activity. We'll pass these around. The instructions are on the paper. It's comparing norms, classroom norms, what's okay, what's not okay at universities in various countries and here. You take about 3 minutes to complete it. He's starting at that end, so I'm going to go to the back. Pass that up.
Okay, I've got a row going on back. Yeah, if y'all can pass it down as opposed to...
Can you reach behind me and get the one?
Passing out paper still. Anybody missing?
You may laugh. When I taught Italian students at UCSB, it was okay to cheat. It was more important. The relationships between students was more important than what was in the class. And it was because they all said, like, I asked about it, like, of course, if someone asks you for answers, you have to. Otherwise, you're back. Got it. So it kind of varies with the child.
Oh, is this for our culture or?
Okay, so if you're from the US, that's our culture. Right.
Okay, good.
For international, you're comparing, if you're from the US, just underline what you think is right. So what we've done before is, Henry had asked, Andy had to ask, and we said, okay, what did you get? Okay, so what did you get?
Are we just talking the university?
Just university. Good question, just university. And it's okay to talk to someone.
Usually whispering in the classroom.
Yeah. Oh, so clarification. Offer personal views in class. That's personal views related to the class material. Not just like, oh, something, let's talk about Robin Williams. It's about the class material. And arrive a few minutes late.
I mean, there's no rule that says kids say I don't know.
Yeah. I'd rather give you the wrong answer than the...
Yeah. But it's not wrong to say I don't know. You said whispering to someone, okay? Yes. Oh, because I do it all the time.
I'm not whispering about what was yesterday. Clarification.
See what we got?
Is everybody pretty much, hopefully?
Have you got most of the answers yet?
That's why there's a somewhat category, just in case.
I say it's not okay.
All right, let's find out. The gentle bell, bring your attention back to the front. We're trying to throw in some classroom management techniques, and if nothing else, here's one for you. Do you ever use PowerPoint in class? Raise your hand if you use PowerPoint. You know the magic W? W. W again. W. W again. Guess what B gets? E. E.
Where did you go WB?
Then you get TV. Dun.
Is that channel still going? Okay, anyways, cultural expectations in the classroom, we'll just kind of go through it, get y'all's general feeling about it. So is asking the instructor questions during class okay? Feel free to raise your hands. Okay. Somewhat okay? Okay, that's okay, don't feel embarrassed about it. It's- Or not okay. Or not okay. Okay, so nobody thought it was not okay. So it's a humanity.
Right, yeah, we're finding some differences between the schools, interestingly. But, yeah, generally, everyone agrees it's okay to ask questions during class.
You are shy students, right?
Yeah.
He's just making sure. Eating during class, is that okay?
Interesting.
Reading, somewhat okay? Everybody somewhat? Yeah, or not okay? Okay, got one couple not okay, I think okay.
In my country, it was not.
Yeah, I think it's a lot, I think it's,
In my country, it is not okay.
yeah, I think we had some of the same responses. And sometimes we have lectures that run during lunch or through dinner, so it's just like, I wouldn't like anything smelly in my classroom, but.
Yeah, you don't want gumbo, you don't
Yeah.
want kimchi.
Yeah.
So you set the standard, you let students know, in general, it's okay to have drinks in class, to bring drinks. A lot of people do it, students, professors. Food, we found that in lecture halls, you've probably had the same experience. If it's a lecture, especially during a meal time, maybe the student has no breaks that day, and it's the only time they get a chance to eat. They kind of eat on the slide, not too obviously. But if you have a discussion with 15 people, if it's okay with you, I mean, I've said something, if you bring something for everybody. If you're that hungry, bring something for everyone, because we're hungry too. Or you could say, let them know, it's okay to bring drinks, but please don't bring any food to this class. I would tell them ahead of time. But generally, somewhat, because it depends if it's a big crowded lecture or a small discussion where more people are affected.
Cool, all right, next one. Cheating on the exam, okay?
It's not okay.
Okay, somewhat
You can do
okay?
that, Michael.
Okay, not okay, all right, good, that was a freebie. Okay. Leaving the class to use the restroom, is that okay? Somewhat okay? And not okay. And the somewhat, is it like a situational type of thing?
Like not during an exam.
Yeah.
Okay, not during an exam.
Yeah. Sometimes I ask them to raise their hand like during the exam,
Yeah.
otherwise if it's during lecture, they could just
Yeah.
take them.
Okay,
But what if it becomes a pattern with certain individuals, where you're noticing that they're just taking off? Like I had a class, I took a history class during the summer, and there was a young lady in there, and it was kind of annoying because she would always leave at a certain time, and she would be gone for a certain amount of time, and she'd come back in. And the instructor was fabulous, but he was so laxed about it. It was to the point where it would annoy us.
Did she have a medical reason for that?
No, she looked pretty young. I'm pretty sure it wasn't a medical reason. She would come in and she'd be oblivious to our discussions. But she like deliberately missed certain
so
lectures.
for that, if you see a pattern, I recommend speaking with a student outside of class before or after, at office hours, not in front of everyone, for sure. And let students know what to expect. Here's something where one of the outcomes was some ideas of what they expect versus reality. Many of them, especially if you teach freshman classes, they're still following the high school rules, like they don't want to write in their books, for example, because it's being into you, don't write in your book, you have to return it after. And we want them to write in their books. Another one is, I teach freshman composition and undergraduate studies 10 to freshmen, and they usually, first couple weeks, they raise their hand to go to the bathroom or for anything. And I have to let them know, you don't have to raise your hand, you can just go, but please be quiet, don't be gone long, just don't disturb other people. So just let them know. But is it okay? Most people will say yes, but as you mentioned, situationally, not during exams or get permission during exams. And if you see someone makes a habit of it, that's pretty unusual, but it does happen. If you think other students might be disturbed by it, talk to that student.
Arriving a few minutes late for class?
The up is a typo, you can cross that out.
Yeah.
It's in between arriving up to and just arriving was indecisive. You can't.
You don't think that's
Bad
okay?
compromise.
Is that okay?
If it is once or twice, it's okay, but if it is a continuous one.
Yeah.
and-
Okay, once or
and
you
done by the
said
same
once or
student.
twice, but not continuous.
That's a sign.
Yeah,
Somewhat?
somewhat.
Raise your
was-
hand if it was
maybe-
somewhat.
maybe or somewhat. Is it not okay for everybody?
You're such a
Hi.
Okay, if it's going to be not okay for you, inform
Let
the
them know, let
students.
them
So there is no 5-minute grace period at the program?
know.
There's no 5-minute what?
Grace
The
period?
grace period.
It's up to you.
Yeah,
Up to
it's
you.
up to you as the instructor.
Oddly, at the university, or oddly, culturally, the university I taught at in Mexico, we were supposed to lock our doors 5 minutes after the start of class. And all the instructors were supposed to do this to keep students from coming in late in this early class. And here, I don't do that. And, oh, please, if a student comes in late, don't assume it's because they want to personally insult you. It's hard not to be offended, like, because your time is valuable also, and the other students' time is valuable. But please keep in mind, something could have happened that made them late. Maybe they got a ticket because they were speeding to get to your class on time. Maybe someone in their family just passed away, they got bad news. So please keep in mind that things happen. And if a student comes late, it's not because they're dissing you intentionally. I mean, it could happen, but generally I find, I might assume, I used to think like they didn't care about the class, and they did care about the class, but they had to come from Modesto every day, and I didn't know that, and they get traffic.
I've taken classes where the professor actually regularly shows up at least a few minutes late. So the way I look at it is I mean, if the professor shows up late, that's not as acceptable because that affects everyone.
Yeah.
But if a student shows up late, then they're just hurting themselves. So
I agree with that. And I'm kind of offended when the
that's
professor shows up
more
late.
like if I was teaching them, then I would be more forgiving because they're not really hurting anyone else. They're just themselves.
We had a question in the other one where you were responsible for reteaching it, or going back over it with that student. That's like, no, they should be under like they're punishing themselves, right? If they miss part of the lecture or your discussion or something.
And that may distract, coming late may distract the instructor, the other students, and so.
Let's move on to, we're going to move on to personal views.
I was just gonna reiterate that one. Doesn't it really focus on like how they come in late as well? I've seen people-
Noisily,
Yes.
yeah. And again, at the start of this, back to your thing in the morning on the first day of class, setting expectations. It makes it a world of difference if from day one you let them know. I smile, I tell them, I look really nice, I'm nice, but I'm a mean grader. Just be warned. I warn them. They don't believe it. Yeah, so let them know your expectations. Oh, can you want to continue? We'll finish these up.
How about offering personal views during class? Is it okay? Somewhat? No.
Nice.
No.
No, I said someone.
Yeah. You're not as bad as me.
Yeah.
Using the instructor first name. Is it okay? Somewhat? And not okay.
Yes, in my culture it is not okay.
Right, we found that some of the international students coming in, and also depending what school you come from. Here, the level of formality is such
No,
that,
it is not the question of first name and second name, You cannot call by their name over there.
oh, and here it's, if they invite you to. And students don't know, they're not sure, so I tell them, the undergrads, to always call an instructor by their last name unless or until they invite you to use their first name. It's up to you if you want them to call you by your first name or last name, it's your choice. But we need to tell them that because this is a somewhat informal campus, and there are quite a few, most TAs and quite a few professors don't mind, especially the lecturers, don't mind if students use their first name. It kind of improves the rapport in some sense. But if you don't want them to, let them know. Please call me by my last
No,
name.
but here it is fine, because it is fine. I will let them call my name here, because I have to keep pace with the cultural.
When in Rome, do as the
I have
Romans
to
do.
know the word.
Or you can just ignore them whenever they talk to you.
But here, some professors that they prefer to be called like Professor X
Yeah.
or Dr. X. So it's better to ask them even.
Is it all about the designation? You can use their designation, and after that you can call.
You won't go wrong by calling the professor.
Right, you won't go wrong by saying
And they might correct you.
That's right.
Let them.
Okay, let's quickly do the, I don't know.
Responding to the question with I don't know.
Okay,
Is it okay?
somewhat?
Someone?
Yes, somewhat.
None of
Because
it.
at the same time, they have to let us know how they don't know.
Right.
And how about whispering the classmate for clarification? Is it okay? Somewhat? Not okay.
How can you know that they are talking about something which clarify the thing, rather they can talk something else?
In engineering, like I'm holding the lab, so I personally tell them that if you have problem, if you're asking me, try to ask the guys or the people who are more
if
experienced.
it is a prior announcement, it's fine.
Yeah, so that is the way that I hold the class. I let them to talk to each other, but they have to, at the end when they're submitting their work, they have to write the name of the contributors. I collaborated with.
It's fine.
I don't think you can know for sure unless you go over and listen to them.
You also see pattern.
Right.
So you have to take
Yes,
it
Jim?
for granted.
So you mentioned a couple of times about setting the expectation up front, but one of the points we talked about earlier was first generation college students that don't have much support. How much should we try and help them to adopt these
Help them.
customs if they don't know them?
Reiteration.
Model.
Model and just keep trying. It'll take a while. They're not gonna get it all in the first week. They'll learn something, then forget it. You'll notice this with email. Some of you will email you beautifully composed emails asking questions. Some of them will be overly informal and direct. That kind of thing. It just takes, let them know, because it's, in general, they don't know. Some will know, but many of them don't know the right way to do X or Y. Modeling. Okay, so there are 4 common causes, we'll say, of difficulty students have. I'll say what the causes are, and then these gentlemen will kind of get some ideas from you of what you can do about them, and I'll write on the board while I talk with you. Number 1, language or vocabulary. It could be vocabulary of the material. For example, let's say you're teaching a psych class, and they didn't read the book the chapter before your discussion, and you're using vocabulary from the chapter, and they're not familiar with it, so they're lost. It could happen. Or maybe language. Maybe you have beautiful speaking skills, wonderful speaking skills, better than mine, and you use a lot of highfalutin vocabulary, SAT words that they might not know. So there's a matter of language, vocabulary, not just for internationals, but for any of us. They might not understand it. And for some of our students, they might speak Hmong or Spanish or Portuguese or another language at home, and they've got conversational English fluent, but not necessarily academic English. So that happens with some. Accent, not only if you're international, but primarily for international students, but we all have accents, California accent. We all have accents, regional from the whole country, but also around the world. Perhaps you have a strong accent. What can you do? Maybe students struggle a little bit because they don't understand everything you're saying because of your accent. We'll get some ideas from you in a moment. 3, the material itself, just too hard. They just don't get it. There's some concept that's not clicking, so they struggle. And finally, the 4th one, the student, psychology. Oh, sorry. It could be the student himself, the student herself. It could be because they come in with biases. That happens especially, you're not teaching Math 5, but it happens with Math 5 pre-calculus, which is required of a lot of students. Some come in and say, oh, I suck at math. I have to take this math class, I'm terrible at math. So they don't do very well because they don't try as hard because they think they're going to do poorly anyway. As we're coming and saying, well, I can't play any Beethoven on piano right now, but if I practice a lot, eventually I could. Same with math. And so some come in with biases and preconceived ideas, and what do you do? How do you address that if the student himself or herself has some attitude? I think that's where we go to the discussion. I'll write on the wall.
Before. And so, as far as like language and vocabulary, a lot of times some concepts they're close to each other. So whenever if they're close to each other, and I know that like old students have made mistakes in the past, or if I had a hard time learning or differentiating in the past, I tend to repeat it like the first 5 to 10 times I use it, and so that might span like 2 or 3 like lab periods or something. And so that's just to get them used to it, and hopefully they'll differentiate it, because usually it shows up on an exam later on, whether they know that concept or not. Otherwise, language, if they speak a different language and they have a hard time understanding, I think that's, for me, that's a challenging one. A lot of times, if they have a hard time understanding me, or vice versa, we'll just go to the board and try to write some of the problem out and see where we can understand each other. That's a little bit more time consuming, but like I said, I usually teach lab, so those are usually 3 hours long, so they have time for it. If you're more time constrained, that might be a little bit more challenging.
If you're a native English speaker, just try to speak slowly and clearly. I had experience myself. The first semester that I was here, I had a course, and the instructor was a native speaker, American, and he speaks so fast, and I had a hard time to understand, to follow him. I started recording his voice, but I didn't have time to go over the recording. So if you just speak slowly and clearly, I think they're gonna have easier life, the students.
How about some ideas from you? What can you do if, what should we do if the TA has an accent, a strong accent? What are some ideas?
We all never had teams with very strong accents.
You were in college?
How did you approach questions?
Use email.
Email?
Keep going.
Are there accent modification programs here? I know at my previous university there was one for international students.
Oh, thank you. We'll have to give her that $5 for asking the question. That's okay. Yeah, actually we have weekly pronunciation workshops for international grad students, undergrads, faculty, postdocs, mostly grad students. Weekly pronunciation workshops, and there are also weekly grammar workshops. If you have any students with poor writing, if you're in a class where they're doing a lot of writing, and not just writing in general, addressing the idea, but grammar. You see persistent grammar errors, we have grammar workshops, and I can also do one-on-one work to help them. Other things you can do, what if you have an accent? Gracie, you have a slight accent.
I do. Well, another thing that I was thinking is, if you are constantly, if you're going to be using an acronym, when you first present it, to spell it out what that acronym means, so that it's very clear to them that you're going to be using that acronym over and over again.
Spell out acronyms. Actually, vocabulary. This is for a lot of, not just accent. It helps if you have an accent, but it helps for much of this. Putting the vocabulary either on a slide ahead of time or on the board beforehand of whatever topic you're going to be covering that day. Just the related terms. If you have it on the board, then when you mention it, it could help. A quick example, during micro-teaching a year ago, one student was giving a presentation. He had a strong accent. He kept talking about the pH. And we looked at each other at undergrads and we didn't know what the pH was. And then as he was talking, he went to the board, started working. At some point he wrote pH, and he was talking, and the pH, blah, 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 and he pointed to the word pH. He was talking about chemistry. And I'm like, pH. And if he had written pH on the board at the beginning, we would have caught pH meant pH from the get-go. So putting vocabulary on the board, that's a very useful one. And we're for any of
other
these.
Suggestions?
If
For
the
language
students
and
are
vocab?
struggling, things you can do to help them out.
Yes.
Pictures. Use of pictures for people who can.
Nice. Any other suggestions for like material? If a student has a really hard time, like I also have trouble approaching students who are really far behind, or if it's like after the first midterm they're just not doing so hot. And how far back do you help instruct them or help guide them essentially? So I mean, I just tell them to try to make it to as many office hours as possible. I'll try to catch up. But I'm not sure what y'all's methods are.
Ooh, that would take us to office hours, but we have one more thing that will help. The hot sheet. Oh, yes.
I know for me, when I learned the English, what was helpful was to feel safe in my learning space. So if people welcome me asking questions or asking for clarification, and I didn't feel judged or being laughed at, I could learn. So creating that kind of an environment, I think, is important for all of us.
So I think we'll skip the hot sheet, come back to it,
Okay.
because this ties in very nicely to part 3. We're going to come back to this edge of part 2, making adjustments mid-stride, because that fits. So if you couldn't hear, talk about making the space safe, making students feel comfortable, which takes us to student-TA interaction, the importance of greeting and establishing rapport, making students feel comfortable. If students are not comfortable, they're going to be afraid to ask questions if they have them or volunteer or anything, right? So how can you make students comfortable? How can you make students comfortable in class? What should you do in the beginning? You already had the workshop on the first day of class. What are some ideas, things you can do to help students feel safe speaking and talking to you?
Introductions.
Introductions, acknowledgements, saying hi.
Sort of icebreaker.
Icebreakers,
Say it one more time.
Icebreakers.
Do you like the letter I?
Like what?
I've never done that many, like sometimes I will, but it's a, I think I've tried it once, and then I was at a conference where like every session was an icebreaker, I was like, oh, come on. Yeah, running out of ideas.
Someone just said this, it's like say hi, was that you? Greet them. As they come in, even if you're prepping, you're concentrating on what you're about to do, just to acknowledge as they come in, say hello, greet them. If you know their name, say their name. If you ignore them while they come in, it's kind of setting a tone. And if someone comes up to you with a question, you can't talk because you're busy, say, I'll be happy to talk with you at the end of class. Right now I've got to get this ready. But then as people come in, you can even do what Henry called the head nod.
I just kind of head nod at people. I don't talk that much, but, well, I might sometimes. But yeah, I mean, I do a lot of small talk. Like if it's passed over a weekend, I'll try to do, if there's like some social, like sporting event, but a lot of the students play video games now, so it's out of my realm of knowledge. But also, like some other grad students were talking about, if you were going to go over a topic, maybe some hot news in your research area that made, the New York Times or something, it's like, oh, do you guys know about something that happened in this computer science field, or for me, like the water, there's always a drought, so I'm always, sometimes I talk about, man, you guys should stop showering, or like stop, not stop showering, but it's
So in computer science, I was supposed to open the labs for the students. So I always like open the door and then I hold it for them, and then I let everybody go in, and then I say hello or everything at the beginning.
That's really nice. Instead of just opening the door and saying, there you go, and walking to your desk, you held it open for them.
Yeah, and then everybody.
Welcome, come on in, best class you'll ever have. You will love this lab, get in there. All right.
that might be promising.
You try. We've got Timothy and then someone else.
Oh, I always ask them like, oh, how is everyone doing today? And then they kind of say, oh, good, or tired. And then I'll say, how are you feeling about the class? And then that's how I kind of lead into the material.
If it's after a midterm, I definitely like, how did you guys feel? Like, how did you
Okay, what about office hours? Here's another difference perception, students' perception versus reality. Coming from the high school teachers generally will walk up to a student if they're not doing well in class. I'm sorry, you're missing your third assignment, your third essay. You're not going to pass this class if you don't get it done by Thursday. Okay, so they might approach a student, tell them they're missing something, they need to get something done, they're not going to fail, and students might not realize we don't do that. We don't chase after them. We don't email them and approach them and say, by the way, you missed 3 exams. If you don't do X, Y, and Z, you're not going to pass. It's up to them. The onus is on them to go to you. And so you need to let them know that, and then say it again and again and again a few times, because maybe you will chase a few down, but most professors and TAs don't. And so that's one of the differences between expectations and not. Right now I'm teaching freshmen during summer bridge, and they were surprised that if they're failing a class, like, oh well, you're failing. Yeah, you want help? Great, come to me, I would love to help you, but I'm not going to chase you. They're a little bit surprised that we don't hold their hand as much as happens in high school. So that's one thing, let them know that. Office hours, but we want them to go to office hours, right? Yeah. Who has, from other countries, raise your hand, other countries, you're from another country. Okay, not everyone knows, and even, thank you, and even if you're from here, most from here know, but not everyone is aware of what happens at office hours. Can anyone explain it? Based on your experience as an undergrad, maybe. Yes, go.
You can go to get clarification on assignments, the class, pretty much any kind of help that you feel is more like personalized, or if you're shy and you don't like to speak up, I feel like the office hours can be used for many different types of help.
Right, yeah, exactly. So it's the hours that you are available, a set time when you're available to help them. Another thing I learned my second year here, I didn't realize it, some freshmen thought if office hours were from 1 to 3, they had to attend from 1 to 3, like a class. They didn't know you could just show up at any time within that 2-hour period. You might want to make sure your students know. Several didn't attend because they thought, they said, I asked why you didn't come. He said, well, I have class during the second part of your office hours, so I can't leave in the middle of your office hours. And then I figured out, so we learn as we go. You might let them know that it's an opportunity that they can come and go. What can you do at the start of office hours so they feel comfortable?
Open your door.
Open the door? I'm not gonna write this on the board, stop. Okay, takes time. Okay, have the door open if you're one of the lucky ones to have an office with a door.
I'm like, wait a second, door.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe a few years. Okay, open the door. Anything else you can do so they're comfortable when they walk in? They might be shaky. Small talk, just like in the class. It could be about anything. It could be about the class. Some students are afraid to ask questions because they think you're going to think they're stupid. This is what they tell me. They write journals, and so I get student perceptions, freshmen, in their journals. And so they say, I'm afraid to go to office hours. I'm afraid to ask. I don't want the professor to think I'm stupid. And so it might help if you tell them, you know, a lot of students are struggling, let's say with chapter 2. You could actually tell them, you know, a lot of students are having problems with chapter 2. How are you doing with that? And so they say, hey, you're not the only one. You know, some others are too. Okay, so we've got small talk, letting them know they're not the only one, opening the door, leading them maybe with questions a little bit, trying pulling it out of them.
Maybe opening a little about yourself.
Tell them something about yourself. The better they know you, the more comfortable they'll be. Don't you feel like you know some movie stars? You've read about them, you've seen them a lot, you kind of feel like you know them? Maybe? Well, be the movie star. Do you guys have more ideas?
It is not related to office hour, but I myself, whenever explain, it's section by section, the instruction that you usually have. So at the end of each section, I just say, anyone has a question, everything is clear, and then I move on to the next section. So at the end of each section, I will ask any questions, like I'm looking for questions.
But is that during office hours, or is that during discussion?
During the class.
During class. That's actually a great idea. I've observed TAs, not everybody does that. Let's say they talk about 5 different things, and this one might be 5 minutes, this one 10 minutes, this one 8, to actually pause between each one and ask if there are questions at the end of that. Another way to check on, how long should you wait when you ask questions?
Uncomfortable in the time.
Yes.
Perfect answer, and uncomfortable in that. Wait until somebody speaks. I don't know if you know Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and the professor says, what is voodoo economics? Anybody? Voodoo economics is blah, blah, blah. He didn't give it had no wait time. The longer you wait, eventually someone will answer. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
And I mean, if you learned the material beforehand too, like I know where the hard spots are, and so like if nobody, sometimes at least engineering students, they just come in and want to work on homework for the whole 2 hours, and so I'm like, so sometimes I like try to push some, feedback from them, like are you guys stuck at any particular spot? Because like I had trouble making this big assumption here, or something, or like any big assumptions that are like conceptually difficult. So I mean, there are concepts I think some people learn but don't really digest, or like they may just use it but not really digest. So whether they understand it
Yeah, check understanding. Don't assume they understand just because they know their heads. Something to help them understand. We're gonna back up now to the last thing is functional language. What do you say? Here's a slide right before. Do they understand you? How do you know? What do you say to help them understand you? This doesn't matter what your first language is. These sheets are pink because they are hot. They are hot sheets. They are useful. Side 1 is blank. Sorry, side 2. Side 1 is, I have it turned over. Side 1 is blank. Don't look on side 2. We're going to pass those. Those are perfect for that row right there.
Okay.
This goes to this 4. These are for the 2 right here.
Wait, was this the
Once
middle
you
one?
get it, middle one right there.
All right.
Once you get this, you can either start filling it out or just think about it. I recommend just think about it. It'll be faster than writing. Yeah. This one was for. You don't have to write anything. Think about what you would say for each
Okay,
of
who
these
hasn't done that?
situations. These are called signposts. Take some work too. You don't have to write anything.
Oh my goodness, I'm too short. Sorry.
I resemble that remark. So right now, you can think about it. If you want, you can talk to a neighbor. If you're not sure what you would say, ask the person next to you. What would you say for this or that?
Whispering is loud.
Yes.
Somewhat.
I think we need to pass out around the
Oh, the sign-in
sign
sheet?
sheet. It went somewhere. I
I
don't
don't
know
know.
where. Purple sign-in sheet. Who passed that?
It's there, you have it.
Oh, right under the, sorry, the yellow. No, this is commenting and grading.
They need to-
Ours was green, yellow. All right.
What is this?
Yeah, that's
The
what
last one was purple.
Yeah, that's
Okay, I guess.
But I think everybody was supposed to sign 1 per session.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
did.
we signed
Okay, all right.
three.
Oh,
We
okay.
did.
All right, so the copy is floating around, so.
So I think maybe Adriana came and asked for one, maybe she took the other one. All right, so if you don't know what to say, if you're not sure, talk to a person next to you. What would you say in this situation? And don't turn to side 2. I'll turn it out.
This isn't.
Approximately a minute more. Just so you know. Okay, this sheet is not just for non-native speakers, it's for everyone. They're called signposts, and the technical term, signposts. The best lecturers, world-class public speakers use these kinds of phrases all the time to help the audience know what to expect. Even if you're not doing a lecture, if you're leading a discussion, some of these phrases can be very useful. And if you happen to have a strong accent, it is exceptionally useful. During micro-teaching 2 years ago, the day after an international student got this, he had his micro-teaching. In the audience, I had 4 undergraduates listening. He taught, he had a strong accent, he left. We talked about him, and the undergraduates who did not know about the sheet said, his accent was really strong, but wow, he had great organization. Yeah, he said something like, he used those terrific expressions. I knew exactly what he was talking about. And the guy had a strong accent, but they could follow because he used these markers, so they knew, okay, this is something important. He introduced, first I'm going to talk about A, then B, then C. A. Now I'm going to talk about B, B, and finally C. See, the main point is, so what's important is, and he used these expressions, and they got it, I got it, even with it. And they thought it was some miracle that he knew all these things, but it was just this. You can turn it over, and some of the expressions are on the back. As you look, many of you will be saying, oh yeah, of course. It's one thing to know, but it's another thing to use. So we'd like to encourage you to use these signposts when you teach. It will help your students follow. I think that brings us to the last part.
Yep. You finish reading?
No,
Right around
it's
time?
right.
Right on time.
55. We want to see if you have any questions. And only short, easy questions, please. No longer the good ones. You're tired. We're tired. We're ready for coffee and cookies. If only someone were responding that. Do you have any questions?
Is everybody TAing in the fall?
Okay, so one more thing, to get feedback before you wrap up. The last point, and this is going to help us with feedback, we wanted there to be something useful in this workshop for you. Hopefully you would walk away saying, damn, that was useful, I got this, this, and this, and that. But at least you got one thing out of it. Here's something you can do if all your students are silent, they're not responding, but you want to know how they're doing, how well they understand something. If you got at least one useful thing out, if you got a bunch of useful ideas, do your thumbs up like this. If you got just one, it was okay, do your thumb like this. And you think, we really need to improve the workshop, do a thumbs down. I mean, you can do it right now. We need to know how we're doing. If you got at least a couple useful ideas, thumbs up. If it was just one or so, thumbs sideways. So we can see what we need to work on. Okay, thank you very much. For international students, we have a bonus. It's US